It's a real pleasure to be with Pete Russell this evening. I just reminded Pete that the first time we met was when he gave a presentation on TM when I was doing my PGCE at Cambridge in the Quaker meeting house in Cambridge. And as far as I remember, there were 3 people in attendance apart from Pete. And one of those has, in fact, Robin Chapman Campbell has been a lifelong friend since. And so that's October 1977, that was. And then Pete's book, The Awakening Earth or the Global Brain, depending on which side of the pond you're in, gave rise to a one-day conference that we put on at Regent's College in 1983, where he spoke about the book. And I brought some Wikimists, some scholars from Winchester College to listen and engage with this. And some of those, in fact, I'm still in touch with. And so that's very nice. And so Pete has been, you might say, at the coalface for a very long time. And we're talking this evening about his new book, which is called Letting Go. And the fact that there are so many of you here this evening is a tribute not only to Pete, but I think also to the importance of letting go and finding an intrinsic peace of mind, which we can if we go inside. And so this is letting go of nothing. Sorry, I should have said that, not just letting go, but letting go of nothing. And what he's trying to do here is distilling the essential wisdom on human consciousness to be found in the various spiritual traditions and disseminate their teachings on self-liberation in contemporary and compelling ways. And what could be more important? So Pete, thank you so much for being with us. And I said I would just give you a little prompt to report on your 1980s answering machine message.
Yes, you mentioned this. Got it. Yes, that was nearly 40. Well, it was in the 80s, 40 years ago. The message, my answer machine message went viral. This is before the internet or any social media, but it went viral. People were talking about it at conferences and people were ringing up my phone just to hear the message. And what it said was, this is not an answering machine. This is a questioning machine. And the questions are, who are you and what do you want? And if you think those are easy questions, remember, most people go their whole lives without ever coming to an answer.
If you still want to leave a message.
We didn't even say that. It just that was it. Okay. And I got a lot of hang-up. I got a lot of people hang up. So I think it was just people just wanting to hear the message, nothing more. Yeah. So let's dig in. I think I'll follow the normal format. I'll talk for a while, probably about half the time. Then we'll have a break and then take questions, discussion. I always find the questions and discussion I actually like, they're probably the best bits because it's live, much more live. Well, this is live, but also, I don't know, I like talking with people. So, I mean, I could just start and just take questions, but I did that a couple of times and it worked. But anyway, letting go. It's something which is really at the root of all spiritual traditions in one way or another, whether it's surrendering to God, letting go of attachments, getting rid of ego. Forgiveness is really about letting go. In one way or another, it's there in every tradition in one way or another. And why is it there? Why is it important? I think if you look at the traditions, they all say in one way or another that holding on leads to loss of clarity of mind, creativity, it creates tension, it leads to unwanted, uncomfortable emotions. It may even lead you to do things you don't want to do. It's really the cause of suffering. And this is what Buddha saw. I mean, Buddha's fundamental insight when he woke up was that holding on, clinging, as it's sometimes translated, is the cause of suffering. And so he saw letting go was the way to actually end suffering, not to end pain. I should point out, there's that old old line you probably heard, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. The pain comes, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever. The suffering is what we add on to it by resisting it, by clinging to our idea of, oh, it shouldn't be like this, I don't like this, I don't want this, I want something better, etc., etc., etc. That's where the suffering comes from, our clinging, basically our clinging to ideas about how things should be for us. And we'll get into that more as we dig into this. And, what they all say is that, when you let go, then life is better. You feel better, you feel more at ease, more relaxed, you can think more clearly, you can be more in touch with your heart. I mean, holding on keeps us out of touch with our heart. So letting go brings all these wonderful benefits, and it takes us back to our own being and being at peace in ourselves. And one of my favorite quotes, in fact, the one I start the book with, is from the Thai Buddhist teacher Ajahn Chah, who said, if you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you will have complete peace. And that's really, I think, the sort of the background to what I want to talk about. And it's something which I've experienced in my own life. And all that I'm really writing about these days and talking about is really just summing up what I've come to conclusions in my own life. It's not really about, different theories about it, or it's not an academic thing. It's just what I found works for me in my own journey of exploring letting go, which really goes right back to what David was saying. When I started TM years ago, back in the late 60s, I realized that letting go was fundamental to meditation, or the sort of TM and the sorts of meditations I'm interested in, which is allowing the mind to relax and quieten down. And it's been a theme which I've been interested in my whole life. I mean, interestingly, right now, I'm digging through 4 decades, 40 years of papers. I've found all these boxes in storage full of writings and papers. And I've been surprised at how much letting go has been coming up as a theme throughout all those years. It's been there in my writing. So, in fact, I tried to write this book several times, and I really in recent years felt I actually had enough of a experience and understanding to actually write about it. So letting go is often, I think it's often misunderstood. On one level, sort of, we think of it as renunciation, letting go of things or behaviors. And so, you find in some traditions, it's about letting go of material possessions or money, or, Buddha's try to, let go of having a good diet, which he realized was pretty crazy in the end. Or, not having relationships, becoming celibate. That's really just, I think, sort of an outward approach to it, which, may have its values, but it's what we're letting go of is an inner thing. And again, we may think of it as letting go of certain thoughts or feelings we're having, which is in a way sort of like getting rid of them. I don't like feeling this, whatever it is, this idea, this thought about somebody, this anger. And so we think letting go is actually getting rid of it. But it's not really. They're just more things in our mind. What we're letting go of is something much deeper, which is our attachment to them. And that's a much more nebulous thing. It's harder to sort of get our hands around the actual attachment. It's really like what psychologists call a mindset. And a mindset is a way of seeing things. It's a frame of reference. It's how we look at things. And we don't actually experience the mindsets, but they're there behind our experience. So they're not something in our experience, but they're there behind the experience. I sometimes draw the analogy, if you're looking at the world through blue tinted glasses, then you see the world in a blue light, but you don't see the glasses. They're what you see the world through. They're not something in the world that we see. So I think it's the same with letting go. We're seeing things, we're seeing the world through some belief system, some mindset, some story, but we don't see that. It's not an actual thing in our experience. And so that's where the title of the book came from, Letting Go of Nothing. It's deliberately provocative, but it's really letting go of no thing, the no thing of our mindset. We're not letting go of things so much. We're letting go of the mindset through which we see things. So that's a sort of part of the pun of the title, and there's other meanings too. Now, when you tell someone to let go, or they tell themselves to let go, people say, I just need to let go, but I just can't do it. Or, people say, oh, just let go. And we find it hard to do. I think there's an old, almost a song there, letting go is hard to do. But I think it's true. I think we've all found that. And I think part of the reason is, there's a couple of reasons for this. One is we're already in a way doing too much. We're doing the holding on. And I see letting go as an undoing or a relaxing of the holding on, which isn't something you actually do in the normal sense of doing. I take the analogy, if you're holding a stone up in the air in your hand, you're holding a stone, then I say let go of the stone. What happens? It happens in a fraction of a second, but really you notice the grip, you notice the tension in your muscles, you let the muscles relax, and the stone falls. The letting go happens. And I see it's the same way with us in our mind. It's about noticing what's going on, noticing the grip the mind has on something. That's what our attachment is. Our attachment to something is the mind gets gripped onto, this is the way things have to be for us. That's usually what it's about in some way or another. That's the mind gripping onto something, either something it likes or something it doesn't like. And so I see letting go, and what I've been exploring is how to release, how to let the mind relax, how to release the grip. And part of that is letting be. Of course, I could quote the Beatles here, very topical at the moment with them. But letting be is something that comes up in just about every culture. But there's two sides, not two sides, but there's two levels of letting be. The way we normally think of letting be is to let the situation be, not get worried about it. Someone's being awkward, or there's a difficult situation going on. You just say, let it be, which means don't worry about it, don't get upset about it. But that can be sort of misunderstood as, almost like let people walk all over you. Let it be, don't worry. I mean, there's many times when we don't want to let the situation be. We want to, there's things we need to change. We may need to give someone some, important critical feedback or something. And the way I see it, letting be is not so much letting the situation be, not getting worried about it or upset about it, but it's about letting our experience of it be, whatever our experience in the moment, let that be. And it's more the opposite. It's more like, if we're upset, then actually noticing the upset, accepting that, feeling what it's like to be upset. So this is actually the opposite of what we tend to do with letting go. We think of letting go of something is getting rid. I don't like this emotion, I want to get rid of it. I don't like these thoughts, I want to get rid of them. And to actually experience them more fully seems the opposite. It's like, well, why should I want to, if I'm feeling sad, why should I want to let in the sadness? I mean, I might start blubbing in public or something. I want to get rid of it. And so what we often tend to do is push these things to the edge of our awareness, thinking if we push them out to the edge of our awareness, then they won't bother us. But, of course, we know they do. I think this is what Carl Jung was pointing to when he said, what you resist persists, meaning what you don't let into your consciousness persists. It's still there and it still controls us, maybe at a less conscious level. So what I suggest in my work is the first stage in letting go is actually to let in the experience. Before we can let it be, we actually have to let it in, because often we don't actually know what's going on. We don't really know what we're experiencing. And so we do the opposite to what we tend to do. Instead of pushing it away, opening up, being curious, and letting it in. So if we take, let's take emotions, for example, because that's something I think we all get caught up in from time to time. And any emotion is actually, if you look at it closely, there's two things going on in an emotion. There's something going on in the body, some feeling, and there's something going on in terms of some story, something we're telling ourselves. And we can approach an emotion either from both sides in letting go. So we'll just take the feeling side first, because with any emotion, that's what's sometimes called an action tendency. Behind an emotion is some impulse to act. In fact, the word emotion comes from the Latin e motere, which means to move out. So there's a tendency to move out into the world in some way or another. So, if you're feeling angry, the moving out may be to, gross cases, to hit somebody, but you want to go out, you want to correct them, you want to change them in some way or another. If it's fear, the tendency is you want to back off, run away. If it's shame, you want to sort of hide, you want to withdraw and hide. That's still an act, although it may not seem an action, that's still a tendency, that's what you want to do. So behind any emotion, there's some sort of impulse to act, which doesn't usually get followed. We don't go around punching everybody we don't like or whatever. So we keep those feelings there, we don't act on them. And I think, as we all know, in one way or another, that just leads to a build-up of tension and uptightness. So the first thing I suggest to people is actually look at what's going on in the body. Be curious, let the feeling in. And it's interesting, we use the word feeling in English, both feeling as a sensation in the body and as an emotion. And it's no accident the two are connected like that. So I suggest people, be quiet, notice what's going on. We may think, oh, I'm angry and I'm feeling uptight. But that's just putting a label on it, really. Go in, notice what is actually going on in the body. You may notice a tightness in the jaw or something, but you may notice something else, like, oh, there's a heaviness in my chest, or there's a quivering in the stomach, or my legs are feeling a bit uneasy. Just being curious is letting it in, and looking for things like, I sometimes ask, is there something else going on here I may not have noticed? And what I find is the more I let in the experience and then just let it be, then the letting be comes, like not trying to change it, let it in. And whatever you notice, just allowing it to be there as it is, that I've stopped resisting the experience. And when I stop resisting it, then the holding on begins to decrease on its own. It begins to soften. It begins to soften, and I don't feel so caught up in it. So this is why I think allowing yourself to feel it, it's like, when you feel the tension in your hand, you let go of the stone. When you begin to feel what's going on and notice it, and almost, may sound strange, relax into it, then the letting go begins to happen of its own accord. And usually it's a softening of that holding on, that relaxing. And the other side, as I say, of an emotion is there's some story going on that's there. I mean, if we take, being upset at somebody, the story is usually something of the nature that this person isn't behaving the way I wanted them to, the way I expected them to, the way I'd like them to, for me to be happy, or the way I would have behaved in that situation. That's a common one. But to see, what is the story? What am I telling myself about this person, this situation? Actually sort of be curious. And again, dig deeper. What's really going on here? How true is this story? maybe telling yourself this person is a whatever it is, stupid so and so. But hang on, what was going on in their mind? How were they perhaps feeling? What were they thinking of you? Had they had a bad night's sleep? Have they got something troubling going on in their life that leading them not to be so caring? So looking at the story, we can begin to see beneath it very often. And again, there's a softening that comes when we see that the story isn't absolutely true. There's some truth to the story. That's why it's there. This person didn't behave as you're expecting. But to dig deeper and actually see, well, what else is going on, begins again to loosen up. The mind begins to relax its grip on what is going on. So those two things are always there in an emotion. In fact, I mean, it's try to have any emotion without a thought. I mean, right now, try to experience any emotion, whether it be anger, sadness, or whatever, without actually having a thought about the past or the future. You can't. They're always wound up together. So in terms of letting go of emotions, I see it as a way of coming in from either side, but I think the body first, because we tend in our culture to go to our heads, to understand things, to work it out, etc. So I always think, first of all, come to the body, notice what's going on, be curious as to what else is going on there, like really get to know the feeling side of what's going on in the emotion. And then as that begins to soften, come to the story and begin to look into that, what's going on here in the story. And sometimes you find just the whole thing just evaporates. Or if not, it gets a lot softer and a lot easier to be with. So why do we hold on? I think this is an important question that underlies a lot of this. Why do we get attached to wanting things to be a certain way? And I think that the underlying question here is, what is it? What is it we really want? What is it we really want in life? Obviously, if you ask people, what do you want? Just straight out, they say, I want more time for myself. I want to, redecorate the house. I want to have a vacation. I want a better job, more money. I want to feel free to socialize again. I don't want, the restrictions of COVID. I want to be free of that, whatever it is. But you start going deeper, okay, why do you want those things? What is it you want underneath that? And you'll get, well, I feel safer. I'll be more comfortable. Things like that. But if you go deeper and you keep asking this question, what people come down to always is, well, I will feel better. I will feel better. I'll be happier. I'll enjoy things more. I'll be more at peace. So this is our ultimate bottom line in life, is how am I feeling? We want to, basically, the most neutral term I can put on it is okay. We're looking for okayness, to feel okay. I mean, okay is a very neutral, bland word, but if you use a word like happiness, then we have our own interpretation of happiness, but it doesn't cover maybe other things of a general, very quiet contentment or some other feeling. So I just use the word okayness, or I sometimes use happiness as a way of just saying this is the bottom line of really what we want. And it is not self-centered, or it is self-centered, obviously, but it's not a hedonistic self-centeredness. I think it's a quite natural human impulse to want to come back to a state of being at peace, being at ease, being content. It's a reflection of how things are in our lives. If everything is okay in the world, if we're safe, if we're clothed, if we're fed, if we're warm, if there's no danger, if everything is okay in the world, we feel okay inside. It's a natural reflection. So feeling okay inside is really a sign that everything is okay. There's nothing to worry about. And then what happens is from time to time, there is something we need to tend to. If I'm feeling hungry, that's an uncomfortable experience. I don't feel okay. So the natural tendency is to go and eat something and you feel better again. Or, if you go out wet and cold, you realize you need to come back and put more clothes on. The wet and cold is a discomfort. You don't feel okay. You come back and do something to return to feeling okay. So it's a completely natural motivation to want to be happy, to want to feel okay. It's there to actually preserve the best conditions for life. It's in a way, you could say it's a reflection of homeostasis. That homeostasis is there to keep our body at the maximum state of functioning. And so the desire to come back to feeling okay is really the motivation to do that. But what happens with us humans is there may be times when there are things we need to tend to in the world, but a lot of the time we don't. We still feel discontent, even though everything around us may be fine. And I sometimes like to think this is the big difference between us and dogs. I mean, I share a dog, and most of the time it's lying down there now, quite happy. It's content. And occasionally, it'll see a cat and get excited, or someone will scold it, or feel discontent for a minute or two, and then it comes back to feeling okay. But us humans, we can feel discontent, not okay, almost all the time. And most of it is because of things we imagine that might happen or might not happen, or didn't happen right in the past. In our imagination, we start creating discontent for ourselves. And that discontent is like, if I don't get this or whatever it is, I'm not going to be happy in the future. So we imagine things that might happen or might not happen. And then we start looking at ways to solve them, to feel better again. I think it was Mark Twain who said, my life has been full of disasters, most of which never happened. And I think that's true of a lot of us. There may not be disasters, but we are continually getting caught up in our thinking about the past, or possibly more about the future, about how we might not be happy, might not get what we want, or there's problems we might come across, how to solve those problems. And it's this thinking that makes us discontent. And they can even be about things that we have no control over whatsoever. Like you might be creating discontent over the leader of your country because he or she isn't doing what you'd like them to do and what would be the best thing. And so you get into problem, well, if I was them, what would I do? Or if I could see them, what would I say? It's like, how much time and energy do we waste on these self-created discontents? But almost the joke is that we are creating discontent, and that discontent is then veiling our natural state of contentment, the natural state of okayness. And rather than recognizing that what we're doing is creating discontent and then trying to solve it by doing things in the world, we don't realize that actually all we need to do is to relax, stop creating the discontent, and we can return to our own natural state of being, our own natural state of okayness. It's like, I sometimes call it the sad joke that we are so busy worrying about whether we're going to be at peace in the future, we don't actually give ourselves the chance to actually be at peace in the present. And so this is why letting go is so important, letting go of all those fantasies, imaginations, all these self-created discontents that are really just creating more suffering for ourselves. And there's behind all this is a very fundamental mindset that really runs our life. And it's something which is, I think, bred into us or taught into us, hypnotized into us almost from the moment we're born, which says that how you feel inside depends upon what you do in the world. So if you're not feeling happy, do something. If you're feeling down, take yourself to a movie, do something. And it's really part of our culture. You see it everywhere. It's basically saying that inner well-being depends upon getting things right in the world. And this leads to a lot of fear and also a lot of wanting to be in control of things. We want to control the world in order to have it be the way we think it needs to be for us to feel okay, for us to be happy. And that's why we get attached. Basically, we get attached to ideas about how to be happy. That's what it's ultimately about. Our attachment is attached to how we want the world to be so that we feel safe, we feel secure, we feel in control, we're not afraid of things, so that we can actually enjoy life and be happy. And this, I see, lies behind a lot of what I call ego. We use the word ego in different ways. And we talk a lot about the need to let go of ego, be free of ego. I don't see ego as a thing. I think it's important to say this. If I look inside myself, I find various thoughts, experiences, feelings, imaginations, whatever. But what I don't find is some separate sense of self, some other part of me, some entity, which is an ego. I find that sense of being, that sense of I, which is always there. But I don't find some other thing, some other entity called an ego. So in that sense, the ego, again, is a no thing. That's another reason we're letting go of nothing. We're letting go of ego. We're letting go of not a thing. What I do find is there are self-centered thoughts about what I want, what I need, and feelings and various things. So there are definitely self-centered thoughts. It's really, I see it more, the ego is a mode of thinking. It's a mode of thinking we get caught up in. I sometimes say, we shouldn't say, my ego is controlling me, but more, I am egoing. It's a process. I am egoing. I'm caught up in this mode of thinking. And again, it's a mindset. It's a way of seeing the world, which comes back to how am I going to be safe, looking after my survival. It's about this way of thinking is really there looking after the organism, keeping the organism safe. And ultimately, the way it works is, if I'm safe, I'm going to feel okay. And so this ego mode of thinking, the egoing, is sort of geared deep down to what's going to make me happy, what's going to make me feel okay. But what I like to point out is it's not an enemy. So often in spiritual circles, the ego is some enemy, or the ego mind, the egoing is some enemy. It's got to be get rid of, you've got to conquer it, you've got to overcome it, you've got to transcend it, whatever it is. And maybe if you do, years of this spiritual practice, maybe you will finally overcome or get rid of your ego. I don't see it that way at all. First of all, the ego, the egoing, the ego mind is an ally. It's not an enemy, it's an ally. It's actually there to keep us safe. It's a way of thinking that's there to look after us. And, if you're out in the street and there's a bus coming towards you, you need that way of thinking that needs to look after yourself and say, hey, you're in danger, do this, look after yourself. Or any situation like that, danger, threat, or something that's important, some need needs satisfying. It's an ally. It's there to get us what we need to keep us safe. The problem is that, I think, as we all know, it gets triggered a lot of times when it's not really needed, when, I might the egoing might be getting caught up in, or, if I do this, what will other people think of me? Will they like me? If they don't like me, I won't feel so loved. I won't feel okay. It gets caught up in a lot of social, psychological situations, personal things. And that's where it's unnecessary. And it's almost like this natural tendency to look after the organism gets corrupted or misapplied to other areas of life where it's not really relevant at all. So I see not that the ego, letting go of ego, is not about getting rid of something or overcoming it. If it's a mode of thought, if it's a way of thinking, then it's something we can really let go of in any moment. And this is the way I approach it. When I notice I'm egoing, I think caught in an ego mind, having egocentric thoughts, whatever it is, in that moment, I actually have the choice not to follow them anymore, which is really, I can choose to step out of egoing. So that for me is letting go of ego, is about being able to choose to let go of it, to not follow those thoughts anymore in that moment. And, it will come back. It comes back, that one or other ones, many times a day. But then letting go of ego becomes not some far off goal that you're working towards, years ahead or something, whatever. It becomes an ongoing practice, moment by moment practice in life. So we're letting go of ego time and time again. And also, as we do so, I find getting better at it. Because when we do that, when we're having some egoic thought, there's usually, it's what usually comes when we let go of it, not, by which I mean not following it anymore, is two things. There's a sense of ease. It's like, yes, this feels better. This feels good. There's a sense of relief that comes. And also, what I call the present moment re-emerges in my awareness. When we're caught up in our egoing, we're caught up in thinking about the past or future in some way or other. When we pause that thought, we're pausing our attachment to the past or future in that moment. And it's like, there's the sound of the bird song, or even the refrigerator, or here's my body sitting here, or whatever it is. The present just re-emerges into our awareness. And again, as so many teachings have said, one of the key things is to be present, to come back to the present moment. And it's the egoing which continually takes us out of the present moment. So whenever I recognize I'm caught in that, I just choose that. Okay, I just choose to pause that thought, not follow it anymore. The thing is, how do we recognize we're caught in it? Because I say that I find myself caught up in a lot of time. How do we recognize that we're actually caught in this egoing mode? There's two things that I found useful, and you may find others yourself. One is, there's always a background sense of tension. It's almost like the hallmark of the egoing, the hallmark of the ego mind is a sense of tension in the mind. It could be a strong sense of tension, or just a very faint sense of tension in the mind somehow, just like a slight tightness there. And I think this is nearly always there. And I think it comes from two things. Partly, when we are in this mode of thinking, our attention is focused on something we need to get done, make happen, something we need to avoid, whatever it is, something that we'd like to see other people do. There's a focusing of the attention. We get caught up in, really, we're thinking hard about something. But also, I think that adds to the tension is a lot of the things we're getting caught up in our ego mind is things that actually have some discontent in them, something that's not right. And that creates a sense of tension as well. So that's one thing I find useful, is to pause and say, am I feeling any sense of tension in the mind? And I say in the mind because that's why I feel it. The body can feel tense, but the mind can feel tense. Is that going on? That's a sign that maybe I'm caught up in something like this. The other one is when that voice is insistent. It's like, you got to do this. I had one recently, like, you got to make this phone call. You got to call this person and tell them what's going on. It's really important. And it's like, it was so insistent. And in that case, I didn't, and it turned out everything worked out absolutely fine. If I had made the call, it would probably screw things up. But the ego needs to be insistent. I call it the ego, the ego mind. Its job is to get you to do things. So it needs to be insistent. If you see a bus coming down the street, it's no good having an ego mind that says, well, I don't know, let's calculate its velocity. Maybe it won't be too bad. Maybe I'm in the matrix and it won't hurt me anyway. It needs to be insistent. That's its job, to help us survive. So when you notice this insistency, then that to me is a clue that there's something here that needs to be released, to let go of. And just to come back, I say, the primary thing there is, letting go of the thought, not following the thought anymore. But also, the same things I was talking about earlier, coming back and noticing, how does that make me feel in the body? Noticing that can also allow you to begin to let go of it, release it, or noticing, what is the story the ego mind is telling me. But perhaps the most profound way I found of doing this, of letting go in this way, is to simply ask, is there another way of seeing this situation? Because, as I said at the beginning, behind all of this, behind all of our attachments, whatever it is, there's a mindset about how we see things. And that mindset is about, usually in one way or another, about how things need to be for us to feel okay. But asking that question, it's a delicate thing, because if I just say, is there another way of seeing this, what's more likely than not is the ego mind will come rushing in and say, oh, well, you could do this, or you could see it that way, you could see it, whatever it is. Why I find this practice useful is a way of actually totally sidestepping our egoing. And it's really asking my inner self, my more authentic self, that is not caught up in the ego's mindset. Is there another way of seeing things? And so the way I like to phrase it is just to pause, to be quiet, and then just ask with the attitude of, who knows, possibly, could there be another way of seeing things? And then just waiting and seeing what happens. And very often what comes is a way of seeing things that's maybe much more compassionate towards the other person, seeing, they're just, struggling in their own way through life, dealing with me. It's a way that I tend to come back to feeling more at ease, more at peace. And it tends to be also, if something happens, it tends to be a sense of truth to it. Like, oh yes, of course. So it's like, why hadn't I seen this before? And the reason we hadn't seen it before is we were so caught up in our particular view of things, we're so attached to our particular view, there wasn't space for our more authentic self to come through and really show us the reality of things, how things really are, without the filter of the ego mind, without the filter of our attachments. So I just suggest that to you as a practice. Well, in fact, we can even do a sort of very short practice on that. Now I know time is getting shorter, but just to think of some situation where you're caught up in something, whatever it is. It could be a feeling, some discomfort, something you're worried about, something I don't know, anything. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is the best thing, always. The first thing that comes to mind. And then just take a moment just to be quiet. Just take a few deeper breaths. That's always a good sign. Just helps the body relax a bit. Just be quieter. And what I like to do is think of something I'm grateful for. And one thing I often use is just the fact I'm grateful for that I do have some inner guidance, that it's there. That's something to be truly grateful for, that we don't need to be caught up in this. I do have inner guidance. And then just to feel that sense of gratitude in your heart, just to feel that sense of gratitude, I find it really sort of almost lubricates the process. And then as you get in touch with that, then just pose the question about whatever it was you saw at the beginning. Just pose the question without looking for an answer, just like, could there possibly be another way of seeing this? And don't try to find an answer. Don't try to answer the question at all. Just drop the question as a seed into your mind. Just drop in as a seed. Could there possibly be another way of seeing this? And wait. Sometimes something pops in immediately. It may come in after we finished, later today, the next day. Sometimes nothing comes, but I find it 50% of the time something comes. It's usually a really important shift. So I just leave that with you as something you can, continue with in your own practice. I find it probably one of the most important things for me for letting go of something, for letting go of anything, is just to stop and say, could there possibly be another way of seeing this? And then seeing what emerges. And what emerges always is not an idea. What emerges is an actual different way of seeing things. You see things in a new light. And just to finish, I mentioned there the authentic self. And there's also what is often in spiritual circles called the true self. There's a question that often goes around, which that question, it was formulated, or in not quite modern times, but Ramana Maharshi, that question, who am I? The question is often misunderstood. You ask, people go through workshops where they're asking, who am I, who am I, who am I, who are you? And what comes up is, what I call the personal self. Who am I? I am Peter Russell, I am British, I am male, I am writer, I am this, I am that. And you can go on for hours thinking of all the things that I am, that I identify with, and all these things that derived from our experience in the world, how we behave in the world, how we like other people to see us, how we think they see us, whatever it is. These are like the clothes we dress up ourselves in. And that's the personal self. Then what I call the authentic self is like the personal self, but without all the attachments, without all the mindsets. The authentic self is the self that's free of all that. That's the authentic self that we get in touch with when we say, is there another way of seeing this? But then what Ramana Maharshi was pointing to was something deeper. It wasn't who am I? I think the question is better phrased as, what am I? What do I mean by I? It's like an inner inquiry into, I use the word I don't know how many times I've used it in the last half hour. I use the word I a lot. What do I actually mean by I? That's the purpose of the question. It's an inner inquiry, not to answer the question intellectually, but an inner inquiry. Say, okay, what do I actually mean? what does I refer to in my own beingness? And what you begin to notice when you do this is that sense of I. It's something that's always there. I mean, it's the same sense of I that was there yesterday, last week, last year. It's the same sense of I that as far back as I can remember when I was a kid. My personal self, all my needs, desires, beliefs, all that may have changed. But the I that knows them, the I that experiences them, that sense of beingness I, has always been there. Not always noticed, but it's always there. And it's always the same. It's always that same sense of I. It doesn't change as there. Personality stuff, all that can change. But the I that, if you like, the I that notices the personality, sees it, that I never changes. It's always the same. I sometimes even like to drop the what from the question and just say, and just ask people, am I? Are you? And when you ask a question that way, am I? The answer is always, virtually always, yes. Yes, I am. And that I see is what the question is pointing to, that level of beingness, that I am is the one thing I think we cannot deny. I think that's what Descartes was getting at with his cogito ergo sum. Because I'm thinking, the one thing I cannot doubt is I am. And I am is, if you like, if you take the verb to be, I am, you are, it is. I am is the first person experience of being. This is how being feels to us in the first person. It's just that quality of I am. Or even, if I want to get really particular about this, is to actually drop the I, because that again makes us think of the something called I. And there's just am, or again, seeing as a process, there's just amming, experiencing, and all of this happening in my experiencing. So that's what it's pointing to, this deep, deep sense of being present that's always there. And in Indian teachings, that's often referred to as Sat Chit Ananda. That's where the word comes. You go back to the original use of Sat Chit Ananda, it's a definition of I. And the words mean, the Sanskrit word sat is often translated as truth, but its actual root in Sanskrit comes from being, what is. The truth is what is, it's being. And so again, it points back to that I am, the beingness of it. And chit is being aware, being conscious. So the I is what is always there. It's the I am, the being. It is consciousness. The I, you could always say I and consciousness are synonymous. And it is Ananda, which has been translated as bliss. And I think that came from, this is my supposition, a few hundred years ago, European explorers went out to India and they discovered these totally different cultures, totally different religions, in strange new languages. And they tried to understand. They were very, sincere, earnest. They were fascinated by this. And somehow the word got translated as bliss. It's like, yes, bliss. That's what it is, which somehow possibly fitted in with a Christian view of how things would be, this ultimate bliss, ecstasy, heaven, or whatever it is. If you look at the root meaning of the word, it actually is interesting. The long A in Sanskrit, means great. And Nanda means contentment. Mm. So Ananda is actually, can be translated as great contentment. So when we fall back into the I, that ever-present, just being aware, there is great contentment. That is where we find the okayness, that deep, deep okayness, the deep, deep contentment that we're really looking for. And that to me is a much more sort of meaningful way of interpreting in my life. It's like, yes, great contentment is something I can taste. Bliss maybe occasionally, but I think bliss diverts us off looking for something ecstatic, whatever it is in our culture. Whereas just seeing it, this is the great contentment that we're looking for in everything we do. And we get attached to all the things we think will give it to us, not realizing that when we let go of all the things we think will give it to us, then it's there. So let me pause there and hand it back to David, and where you want to go from here, David.
Pete, thank you very much. What a wonderful take home. The Nanda, none of us will forget that. And the great contentment. I love that. Just a couple of observations. And you remember from your Latin that I am is sum.
Yes.
It's one word.
Yes.
It isn't differentiated out.
Exactly. Yes. I think if Descartes had meant, what's often understood is my thinking creates myself.
Yeah.
I think, therefore, because I think, therefore I create the I. If he'd meant that, I think he'd have said cogito ergo ego est.
Yes.
Therefore there is a self. Yeah.
I think he was on to being.
He was.
I take a different view of the cogito. Yeah. And then just, we're going to have a break in a moment, but I was reminded that, of course, to grasp things is one of the metaphors we used for understanding. So, comprehend, concept, capere is to grasp.
Yes.
And so getting a grip, it's our ego that tells us we need to get a grip. Literally, as you were talking about, but then somewhere else, some other part of us has to remind us that we need to let go. So we're going to let go for 5 minutes now.
Several things in there. I mean, yes, what you're talking about is abuse of power. And like there's two sides to your question I'm also noticing. Is one is, how can any leader, how can this apply to any leader in any leadership situation? But then also, how can we change leadership, which I think we often get into, is like, what can I do to change them? And I'm always dubious of that when people raise that question of how can we change them. The only person we can really change is ourselves. And hopefully by changing ourselves and many people changing ourselves, we can have an influence on the world. And if we have influence over a particular leader, then there certainly may be things we can do to influence them. But just wanted to point that out, because we easily get caught up in how can they change rather than where is my area of influence. I also like to reframe power sometimes as influence. It's like we have influence over people. In terms of how to exercise leadership in terms of what I've been talking about, I think several things. I mean, firstly, there's nothing wrong to having commitments, to wanting to see something happen, to wanting to change things, to wanting to empower other people. Nothing wrong with having goals at all. I mean, we need those, and a leader's going to have a number of those, that whatever they are, whether it's say empowering people, getting projects done, whatever it is, a number of them. So there's nothing wrong with doing in the world. It's not about letting go in that sense. I think the key questions that I would, in that situation, ask a leader, or if I were in that situation myself, is if I do have something, well, first of all, if there's something that's making me uncomfortable, if there's something that's making me feel uncomfortable, whatever it is, somebody else, a situation, or even something in myself that's uncomfortable, first of all, to look at that, as I was saying at the beginning of the talk, to look at what is actually going on, to get a deeper insight. And first of all, I said, go to the body, because that can often reveal a lot of insights about what is going on. I mean, I had a situation a little while back where I was upset at somebody, I was irritated, I was actually getting quite judgmental about them. And I just went to my body and to see what was actually going on there in my body. And when I got in touch with the feelings out of the blue, I suddenly realized, this person's triggering something about my father. I'd have never guessed that, but by going to the body, I say there's a wisdom there. It's like, that's what's going on. And I could let go of it because I began to see what was happening. So that's the first thing. Any time you're feeling uncomfortable, don't try and overrule it, push it away, but come back and feel what's going on in the body. And that will, I think, allow a person to be able to make decisions which are coming from a clearer place and coming more from the heart. Because when we get caught up in our emotions or even caught up in our head, we're not opening to the heart so much. And the thing, again, what I was talking about, several things, another way of seeing things, I think it would be really important. I found that really important in my life in making decisions. So asking that. But also, being willing to ask how much of this is coming from my own egoing, from my own attachment to not to attachment to the project, say, or the attachment to empowering people. That's a healthy attachment. The attachments I'm talking about, the unhealthy attachments, the attachments that basically at their root have, this is what is going to make me feel better. This is what's going to make me happy. So they're more egoic attachments. To see those things, and again, see through them is important. And I think what I just mentioned, love. I mean, many people have said this, but love is crucial in any leadership. And I don't mean romantic love, that sense, but just love in the fundamental sense of caring for people, absolutely caring for people. And caring for how they feel in a deeper way. We can be quite caring in a way that's, if someone's sick, we care for them. Oh, can I get you some food? Can I help you? Whatever. We're fairly good at caring for other people for their physical well-being, but caring for their inner well-being, which comes back to basically being kind. I think, ultimately we all want the same. We all want to, to feel good, to feel okay. So in any interaction you have with anybody else, so as a leader, any interaction you have with any of your team, to hold in your mind in that interaction, how can I communicate this so that the other people feel loved and appreciated and respected rather than criticized or attacked? Because when we criticize or attack, it's usually a sign that the ego mind is coming in, because if we can put somebody else down, we feel better. If we can attack somebody, our little ego mind feels a bit better for it. So it's about checking at the door. Whenever you notice some attacking thought coming up, some judgmental thought, something that's in some way or another putting the other person down. It could even just be body language. When you notice anything like that coming up, check it and come back to, how can I say this, show this, do this, whatever it is, in such a way that the other person feels loved and appreciated. Basically, so that they feel okay. Because I've been saying all along, that's deep down what we all want, is to feel okay. So shaping one's leadership in such a way that the other people, the people you're leading, feel okay with it.
Thanks very much, Pete. So really looking after people is really key, as you say.
what I was saying in the global brain was, the internet is coming. It wasn't called the internet then, and it's going to be linking us together like the nerve cells in a brain. And I was drawing various parallels, and also saying, was that going to become a sane global brain or an insane global brain? That depended upon our values, which you're pointing out. What's behind a lot of our capitalism and money stuff is the egoic side, which just promotes the insane side of it. So I was actually arguing for an individual growth of consciousness, a worldwide individual awakening would be what was needed to make the global brain a sane global brain. I was then sort of hypothesizing, not even hypothesizing, but just suggesting, that in this case, maybe, the global brain, which, our whole interconnected information processing across the planet, would have its own consciousness, a sort of meta consciousness. I just threw that out as a possibility. I've no idea. So, what is the self of the global brain? If there is a consciousness, I have no idea, except to say that I think that feeling of beingness is universal. It's the same for all of us. I would imagine it's the same for other creatures that are self-conscious enough to be able to reflect upon their awareness. So in some way, I would think that feeling of beingness would be the same deep down. But anyway, that's all sort of conjecture. What I've seen happening since I wrote that book is a burgeoning, accelerating interest in the awakening side and in the other side. I mean, the two are going hand in hand, but what heartens me is seeing the number of people who are, on their own path now. Back then, meditation, yoga were small things. Now, everybody's doing them. When I was writing that book, I was working for an international corporation who didn't want me to let anybody know I was teaching them meditation. Now they're proud to know that people are they're teaching meditation. So I'm interested in how things have changed in terms of more and more people on that path of awakening. Some, really awakening. We've got more and more teachers. That is what gives me hope, is that awakening that's happening worldwide. So I see that as whatever's happening on the consciousness of the global brain, I think this individual awakening is supporting it. And that's about as far as I can go.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I think if we could make the questions and answers a little bit shorter, that would be
okay,
good.
yeah, okay.
We've got a lot of people in the queue here.
I see, we only got half again.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Okay.
So
short questions, short answers. Yes. Okay.
First of all, Peter, thank you very much for the wonderful explanation about letting go, mainly letting go, as you mentioned, of the mindset, resistant, etc. But when you describe, I continue a bit what Abelardo asked a little bit. You describe everything from the individual point of view, even it's the I, which is only the consciousness I, not the personality, but it's still the individual in some way. And from this point of view, you describe that the motivation of this in order to in some way to get rid of all the other thing in order to be happy myself. But I, as many people in the SMN believe, and maybe you also, that we are part, not just as a global brain of the internet, but a global consciousness, that all of us part of this consciousness. Mm-hmm. And each I, as you mentioned, has got the same entity of the big consciousness. And in some way...
You've lost your sound.
So can you hear?
I can hear him.
I can hear you.
Can't hear you.
Yeah.
Peter, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, it's important because then you can hear. So just to summarize, is a motivation, I look at myself, is not just to see how I'll be more happy, because I can go to, I've got enough money, I can invite everything, even when there is no virus, I can order everything from Amazon and be very happy at home, meditation all the day, do nothing. But on the other hand, you yourself have got meditation, you write book in order to change something, in order to help other people to change themselves.
Right.
So maybe our purpose is not just from ego point of view, from the I, but also from there is some universal purpose that we have to contribute to change.
Yes, I agree very much. Some of it is from the ego self, which is very much about what this organism needs. And then we can be motivated by what other people need. You're right. That's why I was hesitant to use the word happiness as what it's all about. But to feel okay. And I think, if we go out of our way to help other people, we get some sort of satisfaction from it. It's that contentment. I feel better. I've been, practicing this recently with some practice of generosity. And I notice whenever I give, to people I don't even know, I feel good about it. And that's not an ego thing. That's just a natural thing. And that's not why I do it. I don't do it to feel good. I do it because I want to do it. So I'm saying happiness is not the right word. Sometimes it's happiness, but that's why I say it's ultimately about us wanting to be in a better state of consciousness. That's the real bottom line. And I think, a lot of what we do to help others, but that's helping us too. And you mentioned global consciousness, perhaps not to get into that now, but deep down, there's one way I think is that sense of being, that sense of I am, I think is the same for each and every one of us. So in that sense, when we touch into that beingness, we touch into something which is common to each and every one of us.
Thank you very much, Pete. In fact, Thomas Troward said, what can say I am in me is the same as what says I am in you.
Absolutely.
And I think he's absolutely right. This is the his work, not at all well known, but it's the hidden power. It's called. It's from the hidden power. Peter, how nice to see you.
Hi.
Hi, Peter.
How
long
really
time
nice
no
to
see.
you.
Yes,
long
lovely.
Time.
Long time.
Do you remember those old Maharishi days?
I do indeed. Ago. I remember those days long time ago. Yes.
Terrific.
Back in the late 60s, early 70s. Anyway, go ahead.
I have a simple question, and I'll keep it simple because David doesn't want us to chat too much. Quite right, too. Everything you said, I like very much indeed, and it's absolutely great for people who have subject-object consciousness. How do you see letting go changes when you go into non-duality and you become the world, in fact? Because then all this idea of changing things sort of with the egoic mind is gone. So how do you formulate that?
Well, when you say go into non-duality, do you mean when you go into that as a sort of a way of looking at the world, or as a personal awakening?
A personal awakening.
Personal awakening.
Yeah.
All I can say from my very limited tastes of that is it's not so much I am the world. There is no sense of separate self.
Absolutely.
And there is that sense of that sense of contentment is there.
Absolutely.
And then out of that comes what many teachers call spontaneous right action.
Yes.
I'm not acting from my own egoic needs, but I see this needs doing. I see that needs doing. I see things that are calling my attention to do things. So I see there is still action, but it's not coming from they call it the ego mind. It's coming from, I am responding to the world and to what I see is being called for me to do in the world.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that.
Very
it's
nice.
Right action in the moment. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks very much,
Nice to see you.
Peter.
That's certainly a way. I know that. I know many people who benefited from that cathartic, that release. Because one of the things, as I say, I mentioned is, a lot of the times we're called to act we have an action tendency, but we suppress it. So it sits in the body. And so some, cathartic dance meditation can be very useful for allowing that to at last have its expression. So that's certainly one way. And the other way, another way, there's many ways, but also what I was suggesting is ties in with that is, be aware, go into the body, because that, as you say, we get back into the reptilian brain. So rather than thinking about things, that's why I suggest go into the body, takes us back into a much more organic thing. Notice, how am I actually feel? What's actually going on in my body to feel it? So it's the same, with cathartic stuff, you're actually expressing it. For me, more it's this process of inner exploration, like what is actually there? Where is attention? What needs to release? So it's very, I think my approach is very similar, perhaps more internal rather than external. Well, first of all, I think, the whole approach I've been talking about and letting go is one of effortlessness in terms of not trying to control things. That doesn't mean it doesn't require applying the attention to something, but the attention can be applied in a relaxed way rather than a way that's straining or tense. So it's really about not trying to control. It's about a relaxed way of doing things. In fact, if there's time, I'm going to lead a meditation at the end where I shall actually focus on this a bit more of just why I think effortlessness really helps in meditation. There's many sorts of meditation, and in some sorts, that sort of concentrated, controlling effort may be part of the practice, and that can have its own value. But the sort of meditation I'm interested in is that which relaxes, allows the mind to relax and become quiet. And there I find effort counterproductive. So, yeah, and the same with letting go. As I said, we try to let go, we try to do letting go, and it doesn't work very well. More often than not, it just pushes things to the back of our mind. So that's why what I've, been working with, really where all this comes from is just this exploration of how to relax the holding on. That's what the effort is already going into the holding on. How do we relax the holding on? So you're right. I see it as an effortless process. Now, is that touching on the question you wanted to ask? I knew there was a bit more, yes. A lot of time action needs to have effort. We need to try, we need to be in control of things. In terms of action in the world, yes. In terms of where we come from, it's partly, say, building on from Peter Fenner's question. All I can talk about is what I find useful, and that is, it's this thing I talk about as the insistency. When I notice this little voice saying, do this, this is important, you got to do this, to let that voice relax, and then to allow what I need to do to come to me. And sometimes it comes because somebody contacts me and whatever it was, and I need to share something, express something, or do something, or it just comes up from inside. So it's about relinquishing that need to be in control of things. That's where it comes from. The egoic mind is that need to be in control of things. So it's relinquishing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
But thanks. We need to move on with a few more.
Yeah, I think because we want to allow 10 minutes at the end for the exercise and meditation. I think you're right. A lot of it is automatic. I think a lot of times when we think we have free will, we don't actually have free will. That's a whole other question.
But I find the one place where I can step out of the stimulus response is when I recognize I'm caught in some stimulus response mode in my thinking. I can actually pause that thought. And I don't think that's so much a stimulus response mode. I can actually choose not to follow a certain thought. So I can choose to step out of the stimulus response mode. That's how I see it.
Inhibition.
Create
Yeah.
that little gap.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Marilyn.
Obviously, love, it's a huge subject. And I've talked a bit about caring for other people, and that's a form of love, is caring for other people. There's what I call a lovingness, which I think is part of our true nature. It's a lovingness. And that's, I think, what we touch into, and what I think, so many spiritual teachers have pointed to is like when we let go of ego, then, and we come back to ourselves, we can be in touch with that lovingness. It's not about loving anything in particular, but it's a feeling of love. It's like, who was it? I think it was Swami Muktananda said, love is the secret sensation of the self. It's secret not because we don't tell people about it. It's secret because it's hidden. But when we take away the veils to our true nature, then we discover that love is there. It's a deep part of our being, that love. I call it lovingness, and it clearly, it's related to what you call the heart chakra. I mean, that's where, I think there's meditations we can do, which I enjoy, which is actually just being aware of that area and noticing the quality of how it actually feels there. Again, love is a feeling as well. It's, and noticing how love feels and how that chakra actually feels.
Thanks very much, Laurie. Thank you, Pete. So right on cue, we've now got 10 minutes or so just to have either meditation or an exercise, whatever you feel is appropriate.
I think a meditation feels appropriate. We talked about it, and I think it'd be a nice way to end. And so I shall lead a meditation. At the end, I will ring a bell. Will be the sign to end. I never like interrupting with saying something. I always like to turn my video off when I'm meditating. It just allows me to go and, be away from the screen and be more internal. But I shall leave my voice on. I shall reappear at the end. So first of all, as I mentioned earlier, just taking a few deeper breaths. And I suggest you do this with the eyes closed. It's probably most of you do when you meditate. It's useful, it allows us to be more internal. But just taking a few deeper breaths, it just says to the body like, things are okay. I can relax. Just breathing out more fully. And just noticing how that feels. And sometimes as you do that, you may notice little bits of holding on in the body that want to release, little things that want to just let go of themselves. You can just allow that to happen. Sometimes I always find myself like wiggling in the chair to get more comfortable. And just noticing your experience in the moment. Whatever it is, you may be hearing, obviously, the sound of my voice. You may hear other sounds around you. Also sensations in the body. Different sensations. Probably lots of places where you're sort of in contact with the world, like your feet against the floor, your thighs against the chair, maybe your back against the back of the chair, whatever. But not focusing on anything, just noticing what's there. Because usually we're so busy thinking, doing other things, we don't actually notice what's happening in the body, or the touch of your clothes against the skin, or the gentle movement of the chest as you breathe. Or sensations in the face. There's lots of little sensations there we often don't notice. Around the eyes, the jaw. What we're really doing here is just allowing our attention to relax into the moment. And in a very unfocused way. Normally, our attention is focused on something. We're paying attention to something. In this exercise, I see it as the opposite. Instead of being zoomed in on something, we're allowing our attention to zoom out, allowing our attention to relax and zoom out. So just, yes, here I am, sitting here in this room. Here's my body, different sensations, but not getting caught up on anything in particular. And you'll just notice the attention drifting around. Something here will attract its attention, something there. And then some thought will attract its attention. And to begin with, you don't even notice that. It just creeps in and you start following some idea. And then after a while, you notice, I was following that thought. First of all, don't blame yourself. Don't feel you've gone wrong. There's nothing in this technique that says you mustn't have thoughts or you've got to stop thoughts. But when you do notice some thought, just making that choice not to follow it anymore. Just leave it for now. You can come back to it later. And instead, just coming back into this moment. In fact, as you choose not to follow it anymore, just the present reveals itself again. Yes, here I am. Just noticing the moment in this relaxed way. And we're not trying to get anywhere, to have anything happen. There's nothing we need to do. We're just allowing ourselves just to rest in this moment. And again, when you find the attention has got interested in some idea, just noticing it. Sometimes you may notice it may have created some faint tension. So just letting that soften and just coming back. Here I am in this moment. Wherever your attention may be, just see, could you be even more relaxed? Could the attention be more relaxed? And as you're sitting here in this more relaxed mode, just noticing also, how does it feel? Just noticing how it feels, if there's a sense of greater ease or quietness, relaxation, contentment, whatever it is. Sometimes people feel a spaciousness. Don't follow my words, but just notice how it feels to be quieter like this. Because so often in meditation, we can be, settling down into a quiet state of mind, but we don't actually notice how it feels. I think this is important. It's also part of the present moment. How you're feeling is part of the present moment. So just including that, whatever it is, along with the sitting here, your body, the sounds. Just noticing that background sense of whatever it is, greater ease, something like that. And just allowing ourselves, in a way, just to soak in that, just to savor it, and just to soak in that for a few moments. And just allow what I call an inner smile to be there. Just like deep inside in your being, just allowing yourself to just smile at being here.
Pete, thank you very much for that. We've all experienced a great deal during the year, not all of it very easy at all. And we've learned a lot. We've tried to make sense of what's going on. And we transition into a new year with a sense of hopefully potential renewal, because the planet and all our systems need that renewal. And you've given us a little bit of energy for renewal by being with us tonight and leading us in that beautiful meditation. Well, greetings to everyone. We'll be sending our greetings to each other. So Pete, lovely to see you. Thanks very much everybody for coming. Thanks, Jerome.
Thank you.